Let's go.
What's up, parties and hardos? We are really excited to do this episode for you guys and going forward. Here's our fantasy special. Going to be coming out, like we said last episode, weekly on Tuesdays. So we're going to cover a little bit. We're going to cover some duds and studs from the week before, waiver wire pickups, and then we're going to do an over-under on projections for the upcoming week. So, Spinny, why don't let's just dive right in, because this was a pretty wild week. Yesterday was wild in terms of fantasy. Who was one of your duds that stood out to you?
Number one dud is the GOAT. And 2 weeks under his projection, 2 weeks, 11 points or fewer in standard quarterback scoring, 10.4 and 9.4 essentially the last 2 weeks on 20-point projections. Bucks offense looks kind of anemic right now, so they got to figure it out. Hopefully getting the guys back in the lineup will help. The offensive line production obviously has not been great, and they played a couple of tough defenses overall. So hopefully it'll pick up there for Brady, but man, they have not looked good despite being 2-0.
Yeah, that was their first win. Tom Brady's first win against the Saints as a Buck. So that's interesting to note that he
regular season win.
Regular season, right. So it's interesting to note that he struggled so bad himself, but they still got the job done and got the win. I had him written down as a dud too. Two other stat lines from previous years. He scored a 4.76 last year, fantasy points against the Saints, and also a 2.36 the year before that against the Saints. So this isn't anything new. Him and the Bucs offense as a whole had struggled against the Saints in the regular season. One of my duds was Jonathan Taylor. He was projected 20.98 in half PPR and only scored 6.8. So that's a huge bust by him. You know, playing the Jaguars, he should be able to run all over them. In his previous 4 games against the Jaguars, he scored 12, which is respectable. You know, you always pretty much take a double-digit scoring from your running backs. 12, 44, 22, and 11. So never went under single digits against the Jaguars. So it was a huge bust performance by him and the offense as a whole. He only had 9 carries for 54 yards. So I didn't watch that game, but that was ugly. That was very ugly. 24-0 loss to the Jags. Can't believe that.
Fun fact, bettors should have bet that game. That was a big hot one. Jags have won at home against Indy 7 straight years.
Damn.
So eighth straight year. The Jags have won at home against Indy. So considering all the bad Jaguars teams in those times, kind of crazy. But yeah, Jags 8-0 in the last 8 years at home against Indy.
That's ridiculous.
Dud time for me, number 2, James Conner. 6.1 points, half PPR, only 7 carries and 2 targets in the passing game. So under 10 total attempted touches, which is not a good number. I don't trust Arizona. Took some heroics from Kyler Murray last week. They had one of those crazy late game window games that was just mind blowing, along with the Jets. The Jets in that onside kick comeback win as well. But I don't trust Conner getting that many touches going forward, given I don't know if Arizona is going to be as good as we thought. That might be a big L for me on my Arizona as the
for you. It's going to be a bigger L for me. I was really high on them going into this season. I think I had them 13-4 or something.
Defense looks bad, and Cliff Kingsbury's coaching is still
terrible.
Bad. So
yeah, that was huge. I have James Conner in my big money league, so that was very, very disappointing for me. My final dud is Devonte Adams, another guy I have in one of my leagues. He was projected 16. All my numbers, by the way, are based off half PPR. I was basing all my stuff off half PPR. He scored 8.2, so he halved his projection. He only had 2 catches on 7 targets, 12 yards. He was salvaged his day with a touchdown. Otherwise, he would have only had he would have had 2.2 points if he didn't catch that touchdown. So terrible game by Devonte Adams. Playing the Cardinals, too, who last year gave up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So after his amazing week 1 showing with Derek Carr, you would expect him to back it up in a similar fashion. You know, maybe not absolutely go off, but at least definitely hit 16 projected points. And So yeah, that was very disappointing to see him struggle against the terrible Cardinals defense.
Agreed. That was a rough one. Yeah, I like it. Should we move to studs now?
Yeah, let's move to studs.
First stud, Falcons wide receiver Drake London. 12 targets, 8 receptions, 86 yards, and a touchdown. First week, he had 7 targets again for 5 receptions, 74 yards. Couple of overachievements for Drake London given his projections, especially with Marcus Mariota and the state of the Falcons offense is kind of crazy. Another candidate I had for my duds was Kyle Pitts. Man has 40 yards through 2 games, getting way outperformed by Drake London. So big shout out to him there. Again, 19 targets through 2 weeks and over 160 yards receiving. So that's absolute good looks for a rookie. If you drafted him late, you might have a startable flex option for the rest of the season.
Not to mention, if you got a keeper league, you drafted him late, he might be a potential option if they keep struggling and they're able to snag one of these QBs in the upcoming NFL draft. So,
yep, Dynasty, another place to target Drake London.
Absolutely. One of my studs this week was Monroe St. Brown. I feel like this is a guy that stands out to basically everybody. What he's been able to do since he kind of exploded halfway through the season last year has just been absolutely absurd to me, especially being on the Lions with Jared Goff. He was projected 11.79, and he scored 34.9 points. Absolutely blew his projection out of the water. That's 20 more points. He had 9 catches for 116 yards, 2 touchdowns. He even had 68 yards rushing on 2 carries. So he was just getting it done everywhere. Again, the Lions looked really good 2 weeks in a row, at least their offense, 30-plus points for the second week in a row. So this might be a team to look into. Amon-Ra, DeAndre Swift, those type of guys, they've been falling out in fantasy. So, maybe try to look to trade for one. Otherwise, you better keep them boys if they're on your team, that's for sure. He also tied the NFL record, interesting note, for most consecutive games with at least 8 catches, which is 8 games in a row. So he has 8 games in a row with at least 8 catches. So you're in a PPR league, you're absolutely loving what he's doing for you.
Amon-Ra's end of the season last year was absolutely insane. Last 6 games, absolutely nuts. He continued in these first 2. That's a huge, good shout out. My next shout out is going to be one guy specifically, but also the whole team. I'm going to shout out Jalen Waddle. This man had 40 points in half PPR, 29 in standard, 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. Miami's offense looked absolutely amazing. Throw out Tyreek Hill again. He had 31 points in standard, so that would have been 42, at least 42 in total PPR and 37 and a half. And then Tua Tagovailoa 6 touchdowns, also over the 40-point mark. So 3 guys on their offense, absolutely crazy. My auction league, my highest money league, we have Hill and Waddle combo as well as the Bucks D. I have those 2 and the Bucks D. So those guys are loving me this week. I won $10 on my weekly most points scored on that. So we love it.
I would hope so. You have Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. You better have the most points in that league.
And Mahomes and the Bucks D. So that was like 120 just from those 4.
Well, you mentioning the Bucks D is actually my second dud or stud I want to mention. Not often that you bring up defenses when it comes to studs, but the Bucks D, wow, projected 8.49 and scored 29 points. 21 points over their projection. Absolutely destroyed the Saints. 3 interceptions, only 10 points allowed, 6 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, and a touchdown. So absurd production by the Bucks defense. What makes it even crazier, I looked back at their previous 4 games against the Saints in order: 7 points, 0, 3, and 0. So they've never even scored over 7 fantasy points in these recent years against the Saints, but they just exploded for 29 yesterday. So absolutely amazing performance all around by the Bucks D.
Yeah, they were all over it. New Orleans line is normally the strongest point of their team, I would say, and they did not look good yesterday. Jameis also held it a long time overall. Is that the check mark? Duds and studs for week?
Yeah, those were
2, 3?
duds and studs. Week 2, yeah.
All right.
That was lots of. I mean, there was plenty of other guys we could have shouted out for both categories, but
True.
that's what we got. Now we're gonna jump to waiver wire targets. I just want to mention before we dive into some like legit waiver wire targets, 3 fringe guys that may or may not be available in your leagues. If they are, you might want to consider picking them up. Garrett Wilson, rookie for the Jets. He's only owned in 61% of leagues. I noticed he's available in my big money leagues. I might go try to swoop him up after tonight. Gerald Everett, tight end for the Chargers. He started off the season really well. He's owned in 61% of leagues as well. And Tua. I mean, we just see Tua 400 yards, 6 touchdowns. Absolutely insane. Obviously, that might be an outlier a little bit, but we'll see going forward with all the weapons he has. He might be able to keep producing in fantasy, and he's owned in 65% of leagues. So these are some guys I've noticed in some of my 12-man leagues that are still available. So be on the lookout for those guys. My first waiver wire target is Jimmy G. Obviously, Trey Lance unfortunately went out for the season with the ankle injury, broke his ankle. So Jimmy G, that's just an obvious waiver wire target. If you had Trey Lance or if you've been struggling with QB play thus far, 2 games in, this is a guy to target. He knows the system. He's been there for how many years? He knows how to play with Debo and George Kittle. He knows the offense. He should have no issue producing. Now, we know Jimmy G hasn't been an absurd fantasy producer, but he is a quality guy that can get you 15 to 20 points. So if you had Trey Lance, especially, make sure you're trying to pick up Jimmy G this week.
Yeah, I like that. Also, I just want to say this episode will be released Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. So for your last second Tuesday waiver wire pickups, this is where you're going to want to be to see who we like to target. So you should actually have some time to listen and then take us up on that after. All right, my number 1 waiver wire target here is an obvious one. If you are a football fan, Noah Brown. Obviously, him and Cooper Rush have some type of chemistry going on. They lot of time together on the practice field, a lot of second string reps between the two, and this man's only 4% of leagues. So huge shot in certain leagues in most leagues to get him, and in deeper leagues he still might be available post Tuesday waiver wire as well. I used him in our Guillotine League this week, and he saved me from elimination. So huge,
was an amazing start by
Noah Brown.
What even, like, you just figured, like, wow, down?
I just knew the Cooper Rush thing. They had talked about that had been talked about and reported on as the week went on. And I knew that they were going to take CeeDee Lamb away if at all possible. And there had to be another guy to step up. And I figured the security blanket would be the guy he's most comfortable with. So that's why I went Noah Brown, and paid off for me. Kept me alive. We're alive, baby.
Yeah, he's definitely a streaming option for these next couple of weeks while Dak is out. We obviously have no idea what will happen when Dak comes back, but that chemistry was there. I watched the entire Bengals Cowboys game, and he was feeding Noah Brown. So definitely be on the lookout for him. My other one, injury wise, I want to shout out 2 more waiver wire targets, but my other injury guy would be Daryl Williams. There's a chance James Conner misses this game. He left with an ankle injury. Daryl Williams only owned in 10% of leagues. Now, Eno Benjamin's listed as RB2 on the depth chart there in AZ, but he didn't really get much increased work once Conner went out. It was actually Daryl Williams that became the lead back. So be on lookout for Daryl Williams. I'm sure he's available in your league, especially if you have James Conner. You might as well pick up Daryl Williams in the off chance that James Conner has to miss this week or any time going forward. I did see the report said a little bit ago, like an hour ago, that it wasn't believed to be a serious injury. So, he might only miss 1 game or 2, but Daryl Williams is apparently the clear lead back when James Conner is out. They like Eno in that third down role, pass catching role. So Daryl Williams is one of my other waiver wire targets.
Big waiver wire target for me, number 2, Logan Thomas, owned 20% of leagues. He scored 12.7 this week. He scored 8 last week. He's the 8th ranked tight end right now. So especially in your deeper format leagues, you got a lot of tight end underperformance going on. So if you're one of those people, Logan Thomas could be a nice pickup for a slight upgrade for your tight end, at least get you in that top 10 competitive range where you're not losing a huge amount of points on that. I also wanted to give out one, like Bus said, just a more percent owned, but still possibly available in your deeper format leagues, and that's Jeff Wilson. He would have been a huge guy from last week, owned in 76% of leagues right now, so only about 25% of your leagues will he be available. But their third string running back got hurt as well, and he's out for multiple weeks along with Elijah Mitchell. So Jeff Wilson looking at mostly all of the running back touches in San Francisco. And when you have a rushing offense that good, you want your running back, especially if you're getting one guy, you really want him. So deeper format leagues, check them out.
Even just jumping off that, going off top of my head, Jordan Mason would be another guy to look into. He was their RB4 to start the year. And like Spinny said, with Tyrion, is that how you say, Davis Price, with him going out and Elijah Mitchell being out for 2 months, Jordan Mason will now have to step up as RB2. So those would be your two guys to target from the 49ers backfield, and maybe even be on the lookout for them potentially signing a free agent. I'm not sure who's all out there for running backs, but that's pretty common for teams to pursue a veteran running back when their guys go down with injury. My last guy I want to shout out for a waiver wire target is Jacoby Myers. He's owned in 40% of leagues. He had 13 targets this week, 9 catches, and 95 yards. So especially if you're in the PPR format, this is a guy to look at. And in his 2 games so far this year, he had 8.2 points and 14. So those are solid WR3 numbers. Maybe you're just a little weak on your bench and you need another wide receiver just to give you a little more depth. This would be a guy to target. He's going to be a solid WR3 option just because he's definitely Mac Jones's favorite target. Obviously, it's a rush dominant offense, but it's always good to have favorite targets on your bench in case of injury and bye weeks and things like that.
Agreed. Yeah, that's your waiver wire pickups. If you need some guys to target this week, those are some really good options. Low percentage of league ownership, and also let us know your waiver wire picks. Comment on our video here on YouTube and let us know where you're at and what you think on our picks, and give us some of your own guys. I would love to steal people's waiver wire picks. My favorite thing to do as a buster.
Absolutely.
All righty. So now we're gonna go on to our last part here and just do a little week 3 over under. So we look at projections, and we'll let you know what format we're talking about here. Most of mine will be in standard for this because I use my auction standard league as a lot of reference for these guys. So again, if you're in PPR or half PPR, you can adjust based on catches and know where you're at. So we'll let Bus start you off with his first under.
First guy I'm going to go under his projection for week 3 is DJ Moore. He is projected 10.58 and is playing the Saints. I am very suspect about this game. This Saints have a really good D, and they're playing Baker Mayfield. So I am very nervous about DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, the pass catchers in Carolina for this week. He was under in week 1, DJ was, and this week he was projected 11.58 and scored 11.8, so barely over. So he is definitely not started off on the right foot, and it's not going to get any better here in week 3 for DJ Moore.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Saints D obviously is stifling against wide receivers and overall fantasy production. I had a guy that you already talked about for being bad this week, and that's James Conner. He's projected 12.71 and half PPR, according to Sleeper, against the Rams this week. I think the Rams are going to lead that game for most of it. I don't trust Arizona, and especially given his injury situation, his projection might change later in the week. But even if he's available and healthy to go, I think James Conner is a sittable option if you can at the running back position.
Unfortunately for me, he's not sittable. So I'm still going to have to roll with them. I'm probably targeting Daryl Williams in the league this week, just in case. My other underperformance for week 3, I'm predicting Chase Edmonds is once again going to go under his projection. He is projected 12.21. Mine, like Spinny said, his are for these over-unders are standard. Mine are still half PPR. As I said, that's like everything I've just kind of been basing things off of. 12.21 against the Bills. We all know how good the Bills' rushing defense is, how good it was last year, how good it's looked so far. I guess only technically one game in since they're about to play right now. But this has not been a good trend. He had less carries than Raheem Mostert even in week 2 here. He had 8.5 points and 4.6 in his 2 games so far this year. So it's just after going under in 2 games to start the season, both against good defenses, the Patriots and the Ravens, I just can't see Chase Edmonds scoring more than 12 points against the Bills in week 3 here.
I like that one. My under is Darnell Moon, wide receiver, Chicago. 5 total targets and 0.4 points in the first 2 weeks in standard. He's projected 8.14 points in standard. Just with his target load overall in these first 2 weeks, I don't see any chance of him getting there, especially with how anemic the Bears' offense has been. So I'm going to take Darnell Moon as my other under for week 3. So now over nation, overperformers.
That has been brutal so far, the pass catchers for the Bears. Darnell, I know some people win Cole Kmet late in drafts for tight ends, just thinking strictly volume there, and he has 2 targets in 2 weeks. Yeah. So I'm fading the Bears offense, that's for sure. Overs now. My first over, I hate to say it because he's playing the Vikings, but there's no way in hell we keep him under 10.81 fantasy points, and that is Monroe St. Brown. I've already shouted him out. He's been on an absolute tear dating back to halfway through last season, and it's just not going to stop. We know our secondary is our weak point, and he's just going to be a PPR god. I'm assuming we play them Sunday at noon. I haven't looked at the schedule, I guess, but at noon on Sunday, this man's going to eat against us. Last year, even if you look back to week 5 game against the Vikings, when he wasn't even featured really in the offense, this is before he started exploding. He had 7 catches for 65 yards on 8 targets for 10 fantasy points against the Vikings. So before he was even a focal point of the offense, he was still getting you double digits in fantasy points. So, and his other game was 19.8 fantasy points. He had 10 catches for 86 yards and on 12 targets. So there's basically no chance that Amon-Ra scores under 10.81 points against the Vikings, in my eyes at least.
Agreed. My over is another obvious one, I think, and that's Garrett Wilson, only projected 4.1 points in standard, according to Yahoo. So he had 8 targets in week 1 and 14 targets last week, 22 targets overall in 2 weeks. If he's getting that target load, it's going to be absolutely a smash over on the 4.1 projected points. This last week he had 22. Obviously, had 2 receiving touchdowns, and we've seen how open he can get. So I think at 4.1, it's a smash over on Garrett Wilson.
I like Garrett Wilson as well. It's clear that he's Joe Flacco's favorite target. So as long as Joe Flacco's under center, this is the guy that you can start. You can throw in there. Tony Pollard is going to be my final over. He's projected 9.25 points this upcoming week against the Giants. I just really like this week how he was featured in the offense, and I think that's kind of going to be the plan going forward, at least when Dak is out. You know, a lot of screens, a lot of dump offs, a lot of quick options to Pollard since he's so explosive. You noticed a lot in that Bengals game how much they stacked the box whenever Zeke was on the field. So I expect that to be the same. Now, the Giants, they gave up the 8th most fantasy points last year to running backs. And, I mean, 9.25, that's not that many points, especially for a guy like Pollard who's so explosive he could just bust off a 40-yard run or reception at any moment. So I'm liking these odds, especially playing a shitty defense. So I think Pollard will exceed his projection of 9.25 this week.
I don't hate that pick, although spoiler
it's
alert,
risky.
Giants
it's
are winning
risky.
that game. Giants are winning that game. 3-0.
I can see that.
Saquon's going to dominate the Dallas D. Okay, last over for me is another surprising one. A little taking a risk on this one. I'm going to get a lot of hate, I think, but I'm going to go Cam Akers over 8.3 points in standard. Akers had 15 rushing attempts as well as 3 targets this week. So 18 total attempts when he was targeted on the offense. I think that number is only going to go up as he shows more commitment to the blocking game and shows more fire. And I think we saw more of that a little bit here in week 2. And I think Henderson's touches will go down as Akers' go up over this whole season. So I think it's very possible, especially against Arizona, where they could be up a lot, and they could be more of a run-focused offense. I think Cam Akers has a shot, and I believe he's going to go over 8.3 points.
That one is definitely risky, but I like it. It's definitely, I agree with you that Cam Akers, as the season progresses, should become more of the lead back than Darrell Henderson. So I like that pick. It's risky, but I like it. Well, that's all we got for our fantasy special here. This is kind of our weekly format. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to talk duds and studs, waiver wires, and over-unders. So please comment below, contact us, DM us, text us, whatever, your thoughts about how we do this fantasy special. Because we love fantasy. We're obsessed with fantasy sports, especially fantasy football. So we just thought this would be a great opportunity for us to give you guys some more content. So let us know your thoughts on this episode and going forward as well.
Yep. Thank you for listening. Hug your friends and family, and enjoy the Monday Night Football game, which by the time this is out, you already know the score of, and let's skol it up.
Skol.
All right. Skol.
Skol.
Peace out.